You're listening to the Classic Gamers Guild podcast.
Well, look who's back. You're back.
Okay, I'm here this time. Sorry. Yeah.
That was your cue to say something. I'm not sure if you caught that. It was subtle.
I was doing that thing from last time when I wasn't here. I was, fake left, go right. Now I'm here, everyone.
Yeah. All right. Now, as you're aware, we did have Richard Garriott on the show. And, funny enough, you actually did some homework and you played a bit of Ultima 7 to prepare for that, only to not show up. But, I mean, that was a good effort you put in. You told me some stuff that you could only know if you actually played Ultima 7 as opposed to, just kind of watching a walkthrough or something like that, which is something that I would totally do. So why waste some research? What do you think of Ultima 7?
I bloody liked it. I didn't expect to. If anyone out there is catching like a slight raise in the voice there, I don't know why I always have refused to play these types of games. Basically anything that's like top down isometric RPG. I fear anything with acronyms in it because it's immediately confusing. In other words, I never had a reason to actually not play it or actually not like it. I don't know. As everyone listening knows, I love adventure games, and there's always just enough of them to play that I guess I never had to go out my comfort zone. But I know this game meant a lot to you, and we were supposed to do the interview together, which, by the way, I'm glad we didn't because you held that together just beautifully, so professionally. I definitely would have mucked it up.
Well, that's kind of the point, though. That's why you're here.
But Richard is such a respectable man. I'm not sure my take would have been welcome on it. I will say after listening to that interview, I went into like a minor depression because that man has done so much with his life and so many impressive things, like going to space and the Titanic and talking about Secret Service in his home, like. Bloody save some for the rest of us, mate. Like, I felt good about myself until I heard what he's done with his life. I noticed I didn't even bring up Ultima, like creating that. Doesn't even need to be brought up with everything he's achieved. So Anyway, mint job on that, mate. That was fascinating. But yeah,
I definitely have to say that was a really difficult interview for me to try to stay focused and not talk about stuff that weren't video game related, or to talk about stuff like that he generally hasn't really talked about in other interviews, at least as far as I knew. So, I really had to limit down how much I was able to talk about him. But honestly, I could have talked to him for like days on end if I really wanted to, because there's so much I really wanted to talk to him like throughout my entire life. I'm glad I finally got to get some of those questions out there. But even just limiting it to an hour and a half, I think it eventually came out to. It was actually only supposed to be an hour. That's what we agreed to. That's what he, his time, as you can tell, is very valuable. He said, like, I can give you an hour between these times. And so, the way things work with us, I have to start the session to give him a link to the recording program that we use. And just for the sake of safety, I sent it to him like half an hour early, just saying, like, yeah, I know we're only supposed to be at this time. But whenever you're ready, just come on. And he came on instantly. So we had an extra half hour that I was able to talk to him. And even then I still kind of felt like, okay, I really got to keep it down how much I ask about him. Cause he's generous enough to have even offered us an hour. He was so generous to give us, an extra 30 minutes on top of that. I still could have talked to him for hours thereafter if I really wanted to.
Yeah, it was funny too because a lot of people, especially of a certain degree, kind of like my time is valuable, this and that, and sometimes you wonder, is it what do you got going on? But with a man like that, he's like, last week I had the Secret Bloody Service over, and left us with the mystery of who was there that they were protecting. It's like you get the vibe his time is truly that valuable. Yeah. So that was really, really quite nice of him, and no, it was fascinating. I'm actually really curious to read his book at this point. Because besides Ultima, which I now just discovered I like, really kind of curious and fascinated about his life.
It will be interesting, too, to see as you play other Ultima games, because each one is so distinct from one another. So as I've mentioned, and you probably heard me say, Ultima 7 was such a huge step forward from 6. And 6 was even a pretty big step up from 5, et cetera, et cetera. So it's going to be tough just because you like Ultima 7 now, because that's like the first one you played, and I'm glad you did, because I wasn't really sure how it aged for somebody who hasn't played it before. But Ultima 6 is one where it's sort of like, well, can you go back to that one now that you've started here? Can you take that much of a step backward? And I don't mean to say that in a negative way, like Ultima 6 was such a step backwards, because I love that game. It's one of my favorites. But Ultima 7 was just such a huge leap in progress from there that I wonder what it's like for you to start with 7 and then like go that far backwards in technology.
Yeah, well, I think we'll have to find out, if not for that purpose alone. Obviously there's plenty of Ultima 7 for me to still enjoy. It seems like that's a game that can be played for 100 hours if you want to. So I definitely, it's not like I'm going to need more Ultima with how much 7 gives you, but I think I'd be curious to go back to 6 just to kind of answer that question, because I can relate. And obviously, subject matter in hand, I'm at an advantage liking, older games, but I can say that I'd be nervous if somebody played, I don't know, Space Quest 4, and I was like, okay, well, go check out Space Quest 1, or even 3 with the text parser. I'd kind of be like, can you go from, that point and click to a text parser and still like it? I think you can. But anyway, with that example in mind, I feel like I would like it because I, used to stepping back and still enjoying it with this whole thing.
I mean, and one of the things too is Ultima 6, I think, has a lot less intuitive of an interface compared to Ultima 7. I remember not really having too much of a problem with it, but it is a bit clunky. I do kind of admit that. And, back in the day, I don't think I even really read the manual back then. I think, or maybe I just read like the reference guide just to see what keys do what. But Ultima 7, I'll ask you this, even though I'm pretty sure I already know the answer. How easy was Ultima 7 to just like pick up and play?
Oh, remarkably. I don't think I've thought about it until you just said that, because it was, yeah, like which is a good thing, because if it was difficult, I'd have a knee-jerk reaction. But yeah, no, and that's one of the, we can get more into it as we go, but one of the aspects that I loved about it was how familiar it felt to me being an adventure game fan. I didn't expect it to be so much of an adventure game as well. I didn't, honestly, I know this sounds terribly naive, but I didn't think I could just like walk around a village and talk to people and poke in different buildings. I don't know what I really thought. And I'm sure that sounds, extremely daft to people, who love this game or RPGs to begin with, to hear me say that. Again, I don't know what I expected, but I was charmed by how much of an adventure game was hiding underneath of it. So that being said, yeah, really intuitive.
Yeah, and see, my theory behind that actually is that it came out in 1992, if I recall correctly. If not 92, then 93, but I'm pretty sure it was 92. So, as you can, tell by math and numbers, this predates when Windows 95 was a thing. We're still a few years away from that, when Windows became sort of like a base, like core operating system. Before this, we had Windows 3 and 3.1 and 3.11, which are, I don't even really know the difference between them all, but I don't know if you remember back in those days when you had DOS and you had Windows like over top of DOS.
Right.
It was, Windows, there were programs that were made specifically for Windows, so they would only run if you had Windows, but basically you had DOS, so you would boot up the computer to the command prompt, and then you have to type in Win to load up Windows. It's like the graphical interface was such an option if you so wanted one, but underneath it was still DOS. So I guess what I'm basically getting at is that there was a familiarity with how a point-and-click interface at its most basic level kind of really works, because we did still have Windows at the time that Ultima came out. So we knew a lot of principles like drag and drop, double click, single click. We knew basically that was already kind of ingrained in us. If you're going to be playing a game like Ultima 7, then you definitely would have been playing around with Windows, if not a Mac. The Mac was before that with very similar functions. And the more I think about it, when I was thinking about like talking points for this episode, I was sort of thinking about like, well, that's kind of a lot of what the, I'm not sure if it was deliberate or not, but that's definitely kind of the principles that fuel the user interface in Ultima 7. It's, you single click once to see what something is, double click it to use it. When you double click it, if it's something that is, that you then proceed to use it upon something else, it'll turn into crosshairs. So, that's a pretty, that's a pretty good cue as to what's going on. So it's very intuitive and second nature to us, just in how easy we can predict what will do what. I think the only thing that might take a little bit is, how to walk, in which, you point the arrow in the direction that you want to go, and then you hold the right mouse button, which is easy enough because you're using a mouse and there's only 2 buttons to dabble with. So what's it going to be, right?
Right.
So I really think that that's sort of, comparing that to Ultima 6, where it's like this whole big thing where you got to figure things out, what the keys are if you want to use a mouse, because, they kind of had to really make it playable on a keyboard because they couldn't guarantee that everyone playing it had a mouse when Ultima 6 came out. But they kind of wanted a mouse interface option, so it was kind of like a hybrid of both, but both are very playable, one or the other, but neither of which are particularly comfortable. Yeah,
and that's such a good point too. I forget, having grown up in that time, the mouse drivers just were not standard. it was that, nowadays, I think, someone have like a bloody heart attack if they fired up, Windows 10 and the mouse just didn't just naturally work. But yeah, it's a great point. Like you said, I think it gave us all, when I say us all, people that grew up around this sort of thing, gave us all kind of a bit of a heads up. And I think it fuels our enjoyment to this day that we had to really kind of get a little bit dirty to figure out how to get gamers to play, using command line prompts and things like that. I personally started out, because, it's what my father had, it's what was in the house was Macintosh, like System 6, System 7, etc. But we kind of quickly moved on to a DOS Windows machine because my dad was right into Microsoft Flight Simulator. Once Microsoft bought that property, we all of a sudden the Macs were gone and the IBMs were in. What I'm getting at, though, is I had a mate that used to play games with all the time, and I used to kind of talk a little shit, like, Macintosh had the GUI, it was so much easier, and he's like, well, now we got Windows, 3.1 and this and that. So I was like, all right, mate, fire it up, and he had to go through the command prompt, and I'm like, that's what I'm bloody talking about, it's arcane. And so I went back like a week later, and he had figured out how to open up the config file to where, when he launched DOS, it would automatically send him right into Windows.
Yeah.
But anyway, sorry, that was kind of off topic, but it just sent me down memory lane.
It's actually not that entirely off topic, because one of the things that always has to get mentioned when we talk about Ultima 7 was, in fact, how hard it was to get it to run on systems at the time. Because I remember even having a fairly... I wouldn't say top of the line, just because, the 90s was the era in which, the running joke was, by the time you get the computer up to the counter to pay for it, it's already obsolete. Technology was moving...
This is the epitome of that.
Yeah, the technology was moving that fast back then, where the joke was, you can never buy a top of the line machine because it'll always be obsolete by the time you get it home. But, I had a reasonable machine. Like, there's the computer we had at the time was purchased to take care of us for a little while. So there wasn't anything, there wasn't really a whole lot that it couldn't play that was current to when we bought it. And this is probably like around 91, or no, it would have been 92, because I think I played Ultima 7 in like 93. So like, a year after it came out or something like that. Yeah. So, it was a respectable machine, and there wasn't really any reason why it couldn't run it. If you look at the system requirements on the box, I surpassed everything that was required to play the game, but even still, it required so much of this other memory, like expanded memory or extended memory. I forget exactly which one, but there's like different kinds of memory. Yeah, there's like different kinds of memory back then that you had to free up, and this used like one of those specific kinds of memory that was like generally in use by the system. So you had to like, everyone had to run the game off a boot disk. So there was like an actual program that came with the game to create a boot disk, so that you would use that instead of just booting off the hard drive. You would stick in the floppy, load it off your A drive, and that will give you the resources that you need in order to play the game.
Right, right. Well, and right around when this game came out, it was close enough to the transition between like 386 and 486 computers. So that must have been tough on a lot of people. Like if you, I'm not sure, but I'm kind of thinking the Ultima 7 probably maybe wouldn't have run well enough on a 386 to where, you'd have to probably go out and get like a new CPU about it.
Yeah, I would say like it would definitely be chugging along if you were to play it on a 386, as far as I would know. It played pretty well on a 486. I would say if you played on a modern machine, it definitely moves a lot swifter than it did on the 486, or at least my 486. So I think as you get into like the Pentium era, that's kind of where the speed caps out. That's kind of where it plays at if you play it today. Because back in the day when I played on the 486, it took a fair amount of time to get from place to place, like from town to town. That's one of the cool things about Ultima 7, or even a lot of the Ultimas generally. Like I played Ultima 6 before it. It was the same sort of deal because computers were generally a little bit slower back then. It took a little bit of time to get from here to there. It was kind of cool because you had to plan around that. You had to plan around that. Okay, what kind of stuff do I need to do here? Okay, right. Now I need to go over there. So if I leave here, I have to make sure that I'm prepared to make this journey because it'll be a while before I get back here. And then you go over there and you kind of do whatever you need to do. And when you figure out where to go from there, you're like, okay, well, got to make sure I've done everything I need to do here before I leave because it'll be a while before I come back here.
It's like running actual errands,
Yeah.
Real life errands. Let's go to the farthest point first and work your way back so you don't backtrack. And
yeah, but now it's like, you play them on modern machines now and it takes you like 10 seconds to get from town to town just because, we're that much faster now. Which also, sorry, I can't go an episode, I suppose, without making fun of Kathy Rain, but that's kind of one of the things that Kathy Rain really bothered me, just having to go back and forth. It's like, oh, well, now you did this here, now you got to go back over here. Now you got to go talk to everybody again. Now you got to go back. But, back in the day of, Ultima 7, you kind of, you probably still had to do that, but it kind of really felt like there was this onus on you to like get done what you need to do here because it's going to be a while before you get back. Right. Quest for Glory 3 had that exact same feeling for me, where it's like, okay, I'm in Tarna, I got to make sure I'm stocked up on everything I'm going to need from Tarna before I go to the Sambani village, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's I by the way, I don't know if I loathe or respect you for making me also hate Kathy Rain at this point, but something to be said for that.
It's not to be hated. It's not to be hated. It's just there's people make it out to be perfect, and it's not perfect. When you overrate something like Rick and Morty, it's hard not to see the flaws.
Got him.
Yeah.
Nice. Well done. We'll put our text history on Patreon, I guess, for that reference.
We'll talk about Rick and Morty one of these days because we had a pretty interesting conversation about it previous to this episode recording.
We gave a lot of opinions, all of which were correct.
But it is a good show. It is. So that's kind of one of the things that, and nowadays they kind of make up for that. Like I played Skyrim for like about an hour last night. And, the world is just that huge now that it does take that amount of time. So it is kind of, you do kind of get that sense of, okay, well, I got to go to this town now. But then they throw in fast travel and that kind of undoes that all.
Yeah. Because
it's sort of like, okay, well, now I can just hop from town to town and not care. Because if I miss something here, I could just fast travel back there. And I'm not saying... I'm not saying that I regret that they've invented fast travel because, when you have to like travel half an hour across the map, there is a coolness to that, but there is something lost when you hit 40 like I do. But yeah, one of the things I always explain every time I bring up Ultima, I think I've brought it up like a few times now, and I always have to mention that just the sheer scope, just the sheer magnitude of the jump between Ultima 6 and Ultima 7 was just mind-blowing. Like, Ultima 6, if you ever try to play it, the actual game screen where you see like your character on the map is like maybe a third of the screen or something like that. And the rest is all like this big, or maybe like half. I'll be generous and say it was probably just under half of the screen. But it was just like one little section of the screen where everything takes place, and like the rest is like your inventory and stuff like that. So just even loading Ultima 7 and not even seeing a screenshot beforehand to prepare me, and just immediately it's like this whole full screen, like very detailed characters, comparatively to that time. Still, I would say it's pretty detailed. This is actually the first game that I can think of where items, as you see them on the world screen, are proportional. So like a dagger is smaller than a sword, and a sword is smaller than a halberd.
Right,
and, everything is pretty much to scale when you see them on the world screen. The bags in the inventory, they don't go by slots. They just go by how much they can fit. So, there's no grid in any of the bag. It's just that a bag can't hold as much as a backpack, which can't hold as much as a chest, which can't hold as much as a barrel. But it's all just sort of like this internal number crunching. You don't actually see like, oh, well, the dagger takes a square and so does a sword or something like that, right? Where it's like, oh, a key takes the same amount of space in a backpack as a sword does, like some of those games. But I'm
glad you brought that up, because I didn't really appreciate that when I was playing the game until you say it now, because it reminds me of like, Nintendo or NES games where an item is always just, that token sprite size. However large the square is they could make for any given sprite. Every item looks the same. So it was really cool, like you said, that everything was to scale, and then that it also affects the gameplay as to what you can carry. I'm glad you brought it up, because I don't think I stopped to appreciate that.
Yeah, it's funny too, because I don't think very many games have really done this since either. Like, I think that a lot of games still go by like grid systems, I think, for their inventory. I think that a lot of them do kind of go with like sort of disproportionate sizing of items. The downside to this is that things are so easy to get lost. Now, they've a lot of people take this for granted because a lot of people play it on Exalt these days, which is sort of like an engine that you use on modern machines to play Ultima 7 and Serpentile. That kind of modernizes it as well with certain quality of life improvements. So basically a lot of features that weren't available until the expansion pack of Ultima 7 Part 2 were patched into Ultima 7 Part 1, which is like, as long as you have the key in your inventory, you can press the K button to use whatever keys you have on a door. So if you have a key, and you'll have like 15 keys at one point, and you come across a locked door, you press K, click on the door, and if you happen to have the key that unlocks it, it'll unlock. As opposed to the very first state of Ultima 7, in which you actually have to go through and find the key that unlocks that door.
So I played it on Exalt, so I don't have, a point of reference, I guess, for the original. So I wasn't really sure what it was doing for me, other than being told it was, doing good. But that actually does make me feel almost better about using Exalt, because I don't feel like I've missed anything. Like, it sounds like just the right degree of enhancement. It's like I didn't really miss out on any like true gritty experience. And definitely, like you said, gave a bit more quality of life to the gameplay.
The inventory system is, I believe, if you load it through Exalt, it defaults to a paper doll inventory screen, which was first implemented in Ultima 7 Part 2, in which every character model has a different face, but one of two stock generic bodies. And each time you add a piece of armor to that body, you see that body wearing that armor, or if you give it a weapon, you'll see that character holding that weapon. Right. Initially, in the very first incarnation of Ultima 7, which is like Ultima 7 in any form other than playing through Exalt, you actually see character portraits that are actually very well drawn out, and just like, an arrow pointing to your body part or your hand or something where the item will be. So you just see like, oh, in your hand is this sword, pointing to your head is this helmet, and that sort of thing. Whereas in Ultima 7 Part 2, they had the thing where it actually shows your character physically wearing or wielding whatever they have equipped. The reason why I bring this up is because as you probably have discovered by now, one of the first characters to join your party is a little boy named Spark, who is not an adult. He is a young child, like about 10 years old or something like that. I think they say like he's 10 or maybe 14 at most. So the thing with the paper doll system is that everyone has the exact same body, just it's either male or female. And I think maybe the skin tone possibly changes. But since, Spark is a child, but they don't have a child's body, they actually just put Spark's head on the body of a full-grown and very muscularly ripped man. So in the game screen, you see this like little, like I said, he's supposed to be like anywhere from 10 to 14. I can't remember exactly right now. But, he's depicted as a small child on the game screen, on the world screen, I should say. But then as soon as you bring him up in inventory, he's like this big, like 6 foot, like beefcake guy with like these massive tree trunk legs. And like, it's just like, it's just kind of really jarring because they didn't really factor in that, like, oh, maybe not everyone is a full grown person at this point, including one of the main characters of the game.
I thought at some point that was going to lead back to how you liquored up Spike. No, sorry, not Spike. Spark. There we go.
Well, I didn't liquor him up. I mean, actually, wait, no, I totally did, but that's not the point. One of the funny things is, like you said before, if you double click an item, if that item can be used on something else, it'll turn into a crosshairs, right? And a lot of times it's very straightforward. So if you click on a potion, and it turns into crosshairs to who you want to give the potion to. If you click on food, you click on who you want to eat it. If you click on, if you click on a bucket of water, you can click on, you can click it on a little wad of flour to turn it into dough. And that sort of thing. But, with that in mind, you can actually take the first scene, for those of you who aren't aware, the very first scene, you walk into this stables and find this horribly severed corpse, right? All his limbs are severed from the body and all that sort of thing. It's like this ritualistic murder. Very graphic. Like, that's like the most graphic thing I've seen in a video game up to that point, by far.
Oh God, yeah. For the time, that really stuck out as me because that hadn't been spoiled for me in any regard. So when I saw that, first of all, it was a great way to start the game because it really got me hooked. I was like, all right, I can get down with this. But I can't remember a game from that era having something quite that graphic. I was thinking it was close maybe to like Gabriel Knight, but I think that was a couple years later. And either way, that was something. And then the pitchfork through the body up against the wall, it was kind of awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, and but as you know, that the victim is the father of Spark, and one of the items that you find in the crime scene is a bucket full of Christopher's blood. So the blood of the father of Spark. So naturally, when I found Spark, I saved the game just to see what will happen. I don't think it would ruin the game anyways, but that's a sort of every time you want to get a little bit adventurous, you save a game.
That's what Sarah taught you.
Yeah, exactly. So I double clicked on the bucket of blood, and sure enough, it turned into crosshairs. And then I clicked it on Spark, and he runs away screaming, which is an entirely appropriate response to this. But at the same time, because it was still as detailed as it was for its time, there are still some details that go missing because I had to imagine to myself, okay, so what did I just do here? Did I force feed Spark with his father's blood, or did I just dump it all over him? Either way, I can imagine him having that response, but I just, I couldn't decide what I actually did with that bucket of blood of his father.
Yeah, and is either one worse than the other at that point? It's almost bloody hard to tell.
It was I one of the things I spoke with Richard Garriott about, as I'm sure you've probably heard by now, was the he always finds a way, since Ultima 4 or so, he always finds a way to include some sort of violence against children into a lot of his games. He's tried for all of them, I believe. And funny enough, every time I mentioned this to somebody, a lot of people didn't actually realize this part. But there's actually parts in the game where you come across babies in cribs. And if you find a baby out of its crib, you can double click on it, click on the crib, and you'll set him in the crib. And then if you double click on the crib, you'll rock it back and forth a little bit. So I, started doing this, just, playing around with it. And it turns out that if you double click it too fast, like if you keep rapidly double clicking it, so you kind of like interrupt it instead of just letting it rock. So you just keep basically you're telling it to violently shake the crib, and you'll dump the baby out of it, and you'll start crying.
Oh, that's awesome. So, I mean, I think what's kind of nice about, not nice, I'm using all the wrong descriptive words right now. Damn it. What's fun about that? What's a good time? Is that you it doesn't have to be intentional to be like, look what you've done.
Yeah. It wasn't at first until I found that out. Then it was very intentional every time I did it since.
Yeah. So we know the answer to if you could go back in time and meet baby Hitler, what you'd do, depending on how you react to that part of the game.
Then that one thing I'm pretty sure I've tried at one point, but I can't remember what the result is. I'm not sure if you're actually able to attack the babies. I know you can attack children. There's nothing that prevents you from attacking children and killing them. If you so desire, but they never really give you any reason to, quite like previous games. But the babies, I can't remember if you can. I almost feel like you can. Because it's a game where it's sort of like, he doesn't want you to do this stuff, but he won't stop you if you do try.
Right. Well, it brings me great comfort that you can't definitively say that. It's nice to know that. I guess that's where the line is. But yeah, now that you mentioned with the harm to children signature move of his, I'm not sure he'd appreciate me putting it that way, but
he totally would.
There is a baby sacrifice in this game as well, isn't there?
There is, yes. It's part of the expansion pack. So if you do the missions in the expansion pack, you come to a part where you have to fight this one magician. Once you get to a screen, you find that you arrive just moments too late of him sacrificing a child to whatever demon or something dragon. I forget exactly the detail, but ritual sacrifice of a child. And sort of like, okay, that was entirely unnecessary, but okay.
Say what you will about the man, but you've got to respect that level of commitment. I really appreciate it.
That's what I was saying. That's what I said to him. That's what I said. I'm a big fan of how much he stuck to his guns on this.
Yeah. Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Now, hearing you reword it, I can remember that exact point in the interview now.
It's like, they told him not to do it, and they only encouraged him to do it more. It's like... It's like telling George Lucas, don't make Greedo shoot first, and he throws in McClunky.
Yeah. That was poetic. Yeah, nice.
Anyway, sorry, I'm hogging a lot of this time for the context, but let's hear more about your experience.
Oh, goodness. No, I'm enjoying listening to you speak about it, because it's you're so vehement about Ultima 7, and you always have been. It's nice to actually really just go back and forth and chat with you about it, because any previous times we've talked about it, first of all, it's not been at length, and second of all, it was more just you talking at me about it, whereas this time I can actually relate and absorb what you're saying and understand it.
I'm still kind of talking at you about it, but that's why I'm kind of handing you the floor right now.
I guess difference being is that I'm enjoying it this time for once. So. Got him. God, okay. So my experience. Well, I'll say that I guess I didn't. I've already kind of said that I didn't realize that there was kind of an adventure game underneath of this, but it helped put like Quest for Glory into perspective for me, being someone that just really never played these kind of games. And to those listening, obviously you've only really heard me speak about adventure games here on the podcast, but I do like other games, SimCities and Prince of Persia's and Wolfenstein, etc., etc. So it's not that I only like adventure games. It's just. Like I said in the beginning, there's just been plenty of them. I never really had the need to play these games, and I don't have a reason why. It's not based on like snobbery, because I don't have experience with them to say I didn't like them. I just, like, for example, when you sent me, or not sent me, but when we first started talking about Ultima 7, months ago, I remember Googling it while we were talking, seeing screenshots and being like, oh, that's one of those games I don't like. For no reason. I shouldn't have even. I'm being honest. That is what I thought, but it wasn't for like a reason. I just told myself you don't like those games. I don't know why. So this game, it's been kind of groundbreaking for me in the sense that I think I'm getting a lot of like 1992 like quality out of it, because it's doing for me now in 2019 what it did for so many people in 92, where it's like, here's a new genre of game and you might like it. And and so I really appreciate it for that. I'm quite excited to play through it a bit more, and furthermore to jump into 6 a little bit, because I definitely would like to go backwards before forwards. If for nothing else, we're the classic Gamers Guild, nothing. Just fitting. But no, for me it really just showed me that to not be afraid of RPGs, that there's a lot of adventure game elements in there. To
not be afraid of new things.
Yeah, exactly.
Or new old things. I don't know, whatever you call it, but try something once in a while.
Yeah, exactly. You're not wrong for scolding me.
But yeah, I mean, like it's funny enough. It's actually not that new. I think I can't really draw the line, because I actually did miss out a lot of the earlier Ultima games. I kind of like played 5 a little bit, and even that was a little bit too dated for me. I'd like to go back now that I'm a little bit more open-minded, but at the time it was a little bit too much of a step back. So I didn't bother going any further back than that, because it only gets worse from there, or not worse, but it only gets older. But Ultima 6 was very much like just like a slightly more primitive version of Ultima 7, where it was very story and characters and stuff like that. But it did definitely start at a point where it was mostly just dungeon crawling, where it's just sort of like, here's a character, buy your weapons, and there's a bit of a rudimentary story, but there's a lot of like I can't speak for the Ultimate games, but I know like with Might and Magic and Wizardry, it was mostly just like, okay, here's a town, buy your gear, and now go out into the dungeon or the wild or the maze and fight stuff until you get to the next town. There's not really a whole lot of story except just like forward progress. But yeah, there's by this point, by the time Ultima 7 came out, there was quite a lot of RPGs out there that were trying to get more into the storytelling aspect of RPGs, because RPGs aren't really entirely about just the combat when you trace it back to the pen and paper tabletop games. It really is about the character. It's really about the character growth and how each character, based on their abilities and based on their personality, approaches each situation. In fact, I would even say probably one of the more boring parts about those tabletop games is the combat, because all you're doing is rolling dice to hit stuff. I'm not saying that's not fun, but I'm saying it's just so much more fun just like to play the characters in the scenarios. I think that's when that's where Ultima 7 and a lot of these kind of RPGs going to really shine through. And even as you go forward to like Baldur's Gate, and from what I understand, very much so with Planescape, where just like it really is a lot about the character and how you play the character and the character growth.
Yeah, and that's what I really wasn't expecting. And again, I don't know, and I keep bringing this up because I keep asking myself, like, what did you expect? What did you think these games were? And I guess to really overly simplify it, mostly because I really just never have given it much thought. So therefore, my thought on it is just kind of basic and simple. Is I always chalked up Ultima 7 and RPGs of this time, let's say, is like as Quest for Glory, but the opposite. Like if Quest for Glory, if you were to say it's 70% adventure and 30% RPG, making that up on the spot, don't hold me to it. It's not about the bloody percentages. But I would kind of think like, okay, well, these games must be, 70% stats and fighting and things like that, and then 30% story. And, for me, I was like, I'll take a pass, because I love the Quest for Glory series, but my least favorite part was the RPG elements.
Right.
Just again, coming from such an adventure sort of background, I felt like it kind of, for me personally, there was like a little bit of an immersion issue, just because that wasn't my type of thing.
Yeah.
Again, not criticizing.
Well, I'll tell you, and I won't go too far into this because we did talk about this being an idea for a future episode, but I think what generally happens is that the idea of what exactly is an RPG has just become so muddied now. There's so many very, very different styles of games that all get thrown into RPG. If you've never played an RPG before, and I say, here, play this, it's an RPG, you have every reason to think, oh, this is going to be Diablo, right?
Right, yeah. That's a great way to put it for the audience, for people listening, because I'm obviously just not really scratching the surface of what I'm trying to say. But yeah, and then on top of that, kind of like how music's gotten a bit wonky with just ridiculous amounts of subcategories. You deal with that with RPGs like CRPG and JRPG. And you know, for that episode that we will eventually do, I'm really glad that I got to play this first, because that conversation will now be entirely different than it would have been had I played this game. Because I'm literally excited to play more of it. Like it's no longer homework. I'm now willingly doing it.
Just because we need to wrap this up really quickly here, I'm just going to give my last thoughts. Is just about the combat. A lot of people really hate the combat system in this game, and I don't think they're wrong. The combat is pretty clunky now, but I think a lot of it is kind of hindsight, where you look back and be like, oh, that's so primitive. And you're right, it is primitive. But, you know, at the time, it wasn't even all that bad as far as I remember. I mean, maybe some people did think it was that bad, but I thought I understood what it was trying to go for, because it was basically, you know, you can control your character who you want to attack at any given moment, but your characters, you don't have direct control over them the way you did in previous Ultima games, or in like even future RPGs, say Baldur's Gate, where you can pause the game, click on this character, and tell them to attack this guy over here. Because in those games, it is about controlling the party. In Ultima games, and this sort of like was kind of a moment that struck me when Richard Garriott was telling me about how much he wants you to be playing it as you. So you don't really get to control your party members, and that kind of makes sense now. Because like you can tell them the strategy. You can tell this guy, okay, attack whoever is the strongest. You attack whoever is the weakest. You attack from afar, and you just run away from battle. And that's all you can do. And then you turn on combat and let them figure it out for themselves. So, so I think I understood what it was going for, and you know, unfortunately, I think a lot of people will argue that it wasn't executed very well. And like I said, I guess they're not entirely wrong about that. But you know, on the plus side, I do really think that this is kind of like the prototype that led into combat systems like found in Baldur's Gate and Neverwinter's Nights and such like that.
That's really interesting that you say, you know, in hindsight or retrospect, it can seem clunky. Like a lot of that opinion might derive from how people have gotten used to how things are now. Because from my perspective, I thought it was great, because that was, to me, that was battle. That was a fight in a game. Because I'm just, you know, I don't play many modern games. I've played Spider-Man, Red Dead 2, and then a bunch of MotoGP games. So I really don't play a whole lot of modern games. So to me, that was just how you fight in games. I really, in that sense, am truly stuck in the past. So it didn't stick out to me as clunky or anything like that. It played exactly how it should have played in my mind. It was exactly what I would have expected and hoped for at the same time. And as far as, I wouldn't have thought about it until you mentioned it, but as far as only controlling your player, I think I would much prefer that. As I've mentioned to you before off recordings, I don't really like those kind of battle games where you set everything up and then everybody just goes at it. And to me, that's just very, it almost reminds me of like playing like a strategic card game or something where you line it all up and then, you know, you press play and it all just happens. I feel much more immersed if I'm that character and everybody else is playing to their strengths while I play to mine. So I definitely prefer it that way.
Well, I mean, there is elements of that. I mean, like you do kind of set up the strategy. Like I said, you do say, okay, you do this, you do that, you do that. But it's not like later incarnations of this combat system like Baldur's Gate, where you can pause, click on somebody, tell them exactly who to attack, and then click on this person, tell them exactly where to go. Like you're controlling each character individually. This one, you're kind of like a commander, where you sort of say, you basically just tell everyone what's expected of them.
Yes.
So beforehand, like before you even go into combat, you're supposed to already have the setup. You, Dupre, you're my paladin guy, so you go in, charge, and take out like the whoever is the biggest foe, whoever's the strongest, and Shimino, go for whoever's the weakest, I suppose, and YOLO do ranged attacks, that sort of thing. Spark.
I thought you were just saying battle. YOLO out of nowhere. Sorry. You're like, you just go attack him. YOLO. I don't know. It'll work.
And then Spark, just run away from battle, and then as soon as something hostile approaches, then you just push C, and then everyone just does what's expected of them, and you can't really tell them. You can't directly control them. You can't tell them, no, you're supposed to do this. You're supposed to be, you have to, they're just doing what the strategy is as preset.
Yeah. I think I'd be better served if I say it as like, I prefer that element of AI in that scenario for sure. Like that to me actually helps with immersion. I think there's a line when it comes to, for me personally, when it comes to overly controlling every character in it, like you said, and I didn't kind of misspeak earlier, setting everybody up to do their task. It's not that I don't like. That's the right amount of control. I definitely kind of want actually that little bit of control to at least pair them up with the correct enemy, let's say. But I don't want to like micromanage throughout. I do want an element of AI so that I can still feel like my character during the fight, let's say.
Right. Okay, final thoughts from your perspective on Ultima 7?
I was wrong for not giving it a chance. For some of this, I took a bloody long look in the mirror, and I don't know if I like what I saw. No, I thank you for pushing me to get into it. I do actually genuinely regret taking so long to finally play it, and I think it's cool. I think it's kind of groundbreaking for me. It really honestly is, because it's totally changed the way I look at these types of games. So I think it's opened me up to probably a dozen more games that I'll actually try now because of this game. So I feel like I'm talking in 1992 right now, because it's giving me that kind of same perspective that I understand a lot of people had when it came out. So awesome game. If you're like me, where you just really stick to your adventure games and the occasional side scroll or whatever, give us a bloody shot.
There's nobody like that. There's nobody.
I know.
Like that.
I almost just said edit that.
I unfortunately I have some bad news for you though, Paul. As far as the Ultimas go, you've hit peak. It's all downhill from here.
Oh shit.
I mean, you do get Ultima 7 Part 2, and that's not bad. That's pretty good. I still like Ultima 7 Part 1 better, but Ultima 7 Part 2 is it's still good. But once you get into 8, then yeah, you kind of have the best behind you.
Full Icarus here. This happened to me with adventure games too. The first one I played with Gold Rush, and it never got better. Sorry, you brought up Kathy. I had to bring up Gold Rush.
Oh, man. So, if you have opinions, and I'm sure you do, regarding Ultima, let us know. You can write us at mail@classicgamersguild.com. You can look for us on Facebook. We're both a page and a group. Find us on Twitter at the CG Guild. Find us on Instagram at CGG Podcast. And we have a Patreon. If you want to support the show, it would be much appreciated. Money is really not a thing that happens in my life these days. So if you want to put food on my table and make me not die, or at least not be cold on the street, check us out on Patreon. Just look for Classic Gamers Guild and find us there, and give me as much money as you can afford.
Oh, that's awesome. You're really picking up on that Jewish guilt I taught you about. Well done. Speaking of which, bloody Merry Christmas and
oh yes, I forgot. This is our Christmas episode. Merry Christmas, everybody.
Look at the bloody Jew had to remind you. Speaking of Jews, it's to my fellow brews out there. Happy Hanukkah, L'chaim, and save early, save often. Now wait, that's not our thing.